No matter what anyone tells you, and no matter how many times you ask, you never really understand why a person does a thing. The why of anything can be understood only by the person who does it. Why the Master called me to follow him is still a mystery to me. Why I decided to follow him is yet another mystery. Believe me when I tell you that I am not keeping some intricate secret. It's just that I can't give you a rational explanation for what I did. There are those who look down their righteous noses at those of us who collect Caesar's taxes. Quite frankly, I think we were preferable to the alternative, which would likely be a full armored legion of Roman soldiers. All right, maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe the emperor wouldn't send a legion of soldiers, more than 5,000, but he would send plenty. As members of the tribe, so to speak, the tax collectors see themselves, some would say falsely, as keepers of the peace. As long as we were the ones collecting money for Caesar, the soldiers wouldn't have to, and our people would be relatively safe. To our way of thinking, it was that simple. Taxes were and are as inevitable as death, and the Caesars exacted them from us as did the Ptolemies and the Seleucids before them. Collecting taxes was a service provided for the local and state government. Our work required fastidious record keeping and a full understanding of various kinds of taxes. The ground tax on property, and of course the income tax, import and export duties, and taxes levied on all that was publicly sold and bought. Farmers paid 1/3 to 1/2 of their taxes in produce, whether grain, livestock, fruit, or wine. The remainder they paid in coin. Merchants always paid in coin. Local taxes were required to maintain public buildings such as the synagogue and to keep the roads and city walls in good repair. The crown tax was required to support the Roman emperor and our king too. On top of the civil tax, one had to pay the religious tax. The coffers for both could be found side by side in the temple in Jerusalem. My father and I made a good living. We did not live lavishly in comparison to some of the more unscrupulous publicans, but we were quite comfortable. I think the most difficult part of our work was dealing with those who could not pay their taxes. Interest accrued on unpaid taxes, but we were willing to work out payment plans to assist those who found it easier to pay their taxes in smaller amounts more frequently. If taxes went unpaid, the consequences were severe, including imprisonment and the loss of one's home, property, and often one's family members who might be sold into slavery. This occurred more often than I care to remember. Our A&L tax office, that's Alphaeus and Levi, was on the caravan route connecting Damascus with the rest of the Mediterranean. We were situated perfectly at a major point of entry into Palestine from the north and the east. The day I met Rabbi Jesus, it didn't take me long to figure out who he was, since he traveled with a small entourage followed by a big crowd. Everyone was talking about him. You hear a lot at a tax office. I remember one day a fellow looking me straight in the eye said, "That Jesus can make diseases disappear." I wonder if he could do the same to you. We were immune to such barbs and sarcasm. We knew people said much worse things about us behind our backs. All foot traffic and wheeled vehicles were required to stop at the tax office and pay a head tax or merchant tax, whether they were planning to stay in town or just passing through. The day Jesus came to the office, I didn't even look up from my ledger, but held out my hand to receive his tax, to be recorded on the page. I knew somebody was standing there, but his hands were resting on the counter, palms down. Since he made no move to retrieve a coin from his purse, I looked up and I saw, for the first time in many years, a face that was smiling. He looked genuinely glad to see me. We had never met, but he looked at me as if he had known me all my life. His face gleamed, and I was speechless. I'm never speechless. But I was so disarmed by his presence and his demeanor that I just stood there, awestruck. After a long and puzzling silence, he reached out his hand and said, "Levi, follow me." I did. I can't tell you why, but I have followed him since that day. I have followed him all the way. I have never looked back on what I left behind, what might have been or what could have been, and had I not followed. Why did he choose me? I was one of the most hated men in Capernaum and the most likely to be scorned. Nevertheless, he called, and I answered. But in the end, I am left wondering what it was all for. He's been taken from us and murdered by those who were afraid of him. I have no answers. I can only say that tonight my sorrow is greater than any I have ever known. In this moment, I am more afraid as one who followed Jesus than I ever was being a tax collector for Caesar. But there's no turning back for me now.
When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "Listen, he's calling for Elijah." And some ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come and take him down." Then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn into from top to bottom. Now when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly, this man was God's son." There were also women looking on from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James the younger, and Joseph, and Salome.